This is Kate Stevens. Welcome back to another episode of the Omnichannel Marketer. Today, I have Melissa Minkow on the podcast today, and she is going to talk to us about her role as the Director of Retail Strategy at CI&T. Melissa, it's so great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
So why don't we just start with your personal background, your career? How did you come to, where you are in your career right now?
Yeah, so this is kind of a strange start, but what really got me excited about where I ultimately ended up was the movie Amelie, which I watched in high school. And what I loved about it was the nuances and intricacies of human behavior. So that movie, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it introduces every character based on their likes and their dislikes. So their pet peeves, and then also kind of like their simple pleasures. And when I saw that, I just loved the uniqueness and simultaneous universality of the human experience. And it got me really obsessed with what makes each person such an interesting individual, but also so relatable. And so it was kind of from that point on that I knew I wanted to do something related to either psychology or marketing, something that really pertained to the unique differences among humans that also make us all really connected. But really what I ended up doing for a little while, so in high school then during the summers, I worked on the sales floor, anthropology, got great discounts. And I really loved being surrounded by beautiful clothes too. I've always loved fashion, though sometimes maybe my personal style choices don't indicate that. I promise I really do. And so the combination of both, loving human nature and being really fascinated by it, and then also loving fashion came together and really inspired me to pursue marketing and retail UW-Madison. And then from there, I ended up in the summers recruiting for focus groups. So really got to see that connection between human quirks and then also products and what they enjoy. We were doing a lot of product testing for different brands and then also asking people different questions to figure out if they would qualify for a focus group, like how many times a week do you eat cheese? So it was really getting into the nitty gritty of consumer behaviors and also those random tendencies people have when they interact with brands and with products. And I really enjoyed that. And then after college, ended up bringing, all of those passions and that kind of weird combination to Target corporate and did merchandise presentation for them for almost 2 years at Target Canada. And from there, I ended up doing consulting in the retail space and was working for Gartner for a little while, almost 6 years actually, really advising retailers on how to best design shopping experiences for consumers and their multi-channel marketing and their omnichannel path to purchase. And then from Gartner, ended up working for the company that I'm at now, which is called CI&T. And we are a digital consultancy specializing in application modernization, composable commerce, and then customer experience design, and also data and analytics. So we do all of kind of the tech implementation behind retail experiences, but we also work for life sciences brands and financial services and the gamut too. So, yeah.
So I know that you're, the Director of Retail Strategy at CI&T. Could you, talk a little bit more about what that retail strategy looks like?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about the fact that retailers and brands need to build experiences and products best designed for the end user and how we want to be using them. So really kind of suiting products and offerings to our behaviors, our natural tendencies. And then because at CI&T, we build the tech stack that supports the shopping experience or the product development at these brands, I end up doing a ton of research, both primary and secondary, on how consumers want to interact with brands, how they're shopping them. And then I bring that back to our sales team and then also to our engineers and our designers, the people that actually work on our projects, and just basically let them know, here are the high level trends in the retail space, and here's how it should inform our offering. So this is kind of the tech stack that we would need to build to support the shopping mission or the product development process.
And so for that, shopping mission, are you thinking about where does that journey stop and start from a consumer's perspective?
Yeah, It starts, I think, with the brands that they're already interacting with. And I conduct primary research, do all these surveys and basically understand what are consumers liking and what are they disliking about the brands that they currently interact with and the shopping experiences, missions that they're on every day. So it really starts with mostly what they already know, but sometimes it also starts with what they want and that they're not seeing or experiencing in the marketplace. But like I said, because I'm so passionate about really advocating for the consumer, I'm doing all this research, and then for CI&T, I'm writing our white papers and I'm speaking at conferences and on podcasts to educate brands and then prospects on, how we could support those paths to purchase and ultimately kind of the buying occasions for consumers. Because it starts both in consumers' minds and then also in brands' kind of collective minds, if you will, in terms of the types of experiences they're currently creating that are either missing the mark or are doing really well and consumers want to see more of.
So something that, we're really passionate about here at the Omnichannel Marketer, given the name of the podcast, is, the emergence of this omnichannel brand. And so what we saw coming out of the pandemic was, your traditional retail brand is setting up a direct presence, and your, traditionally D2C only brand are now, selling through channels like Amazon and retail like Target. And so, the ability to have a consistent end-to-end relationship with their customers across all of these channels is, part of this greater omni-channel experience. I'd love to hear from you a little bit more about your perspective on, what does it mean to be an omni-channel brand today? And, what are some of the, challenges that brands experience in, trying to be an omni-channel brand?
Yeah, omnichannel is definitely one of those words that I think can be defined a lot of different ways, which we see often in retail. A word gets buzzy and then you see a lot of different kind of iterations of it or manifestations. But the way I would define it is that consumers are able to access your brand or your product. In the case of retail, that means buying from you in multiple ways through multiple avenues. So there isn't just one format through which they could find you or buy you.
And what do you think are some of the challenges that, exist as a brand to be omnichannel today?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges, but I like when there's a lot of challenges because that on the flip side means there's so many opportunities, right? So in terms of challenges, it means that you definitely need so many different teams, more than you ever did before, because ideally you're building out a team for every channel or every avenue that a consumer could find you. You also have to find ways to bridge those channels and kind of connect them to each other so that the data that they're all generating is seamless and you can analyze that data all together versus having this kind of siloed picture of consumer behaviors. It can also be really hard to be good at being everywhere. So that's definitely a challenge. Some brands do a really great job D2C. Other brands are just way better having a presence in a retailer instead. Usually a brand has one strength more than another when it comes to channels, or at least consumers tend to prefer finding them in one channel versus another. So it can be a challenge to just balance that strategy and make sure you are in all the right places at all the right times. And you also always have to figure out, how am I for sure not cannibalizing my own business if I exist through all these different channels. So there are a lot of challenges for sure, but they're all fun challenges.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, what are some of with all of the research that you've done on the consumer insight side, what are some of the learnings that you have from the consumer perspective that, will inform how a brand should be thinking about, being omnichannel?
Yeah, so the biggest complexity of this omnichannel world now is just how to strike that right balance and how to determine, should I only have a D2C strategy, or is it important that I have, a marketplace presence on top of that and a retail presence on top of that? And when you look at it from the consumer insights perspective, the answer ends up being everything, everywhere, all at once. To steal that movie title, you really have to be everywhere, even if consumers don't necessarily intend to shop you everywhere. And that is likely what you'll see. What you'll see is our research shows that usually consumers are going to a marketplace first, most often Amazon, for example, and then they'll go to a retailer page and then they'll go to a brand page. But it's really important that these brands still have their own D2C channels, especially digitally. And oftentimes it's really just to serve the purpose of educating consumers, but it's really because, from that consumer insights perspective, shoppers have very different purposes in going to each channel. So for the marketplace, they usually go there because they want the lowest price and they want to be able to compare a lot of brands. For going to a retailer channel, it's usually because they want to be able to compare a lot of brands, but maybe they also want some really nice services on top of it. And then if they're going D2C and they're going digitally just straight to the CPG brand or the product brand, it's usually because either they have some higher level expectation of some sort of add-on perk that they'll get. Maybe it's like an extra warranty or something along those lines. And or they want to do a lot of deep diving on the brand itself, which they can't usually get that level of depth on a marketplace or at a retailer's website because they carry so many different brands. So D2C is usually an opportunity for the consumer to learn a lot more about that particular brand. And it really facilitates that branded shopping mission. So that's what a lot of our data has shown.
As a consumer, that makes complete sense. And then, talking to brands, I also understand that. But yeah, it's really helpful to hear that perspective on, where consumers are going to for what different types of shopper journeys. I think that's a really interesting and impactful insight. So you mentioned before, one of the challenges of being omnichannel is that, you have these different teams, you have these different, sources of data. What are some, effective ways that you've seen brands trying to bridge those gaps?
Yeah, because that's a really big challenge now that brands are selling in so many different places, is to make sure they're connecting the dots between all of that data. And so that is part of our offering is, data and analytics and like data management, because it is such a hot topic right now. But one way that a brand can be really strategic is to have, special codes depending upon where they're available. So having those uniquely coded discounts and offerings helps trace and source back where the consumer is finding them. And then that is data that can all be integrated and managed in one kind of holistic view or one piece of software. Another key aspect is to make sure that you are creating different services or different offerings depending on the channel. And that can help retailers both keep it straight, but also bridge the gap among channels, because it will incentivize consumers to shop them across channels instead of just in one way. So for example, maybe you only offer certain colorways on a marketplace platform, but then you offer additional colorways on your proprietary kind of D2C site. And so if the consumer is just strictly on a budget, or, they want something like assured 2-day shipping, they'll go to the marketplace. But if they want a very exclusive colorway, they'll know to go D2C. So you kind of just have to differentiate your channel strategy quite a bit, but make sure that that differentiated strategy also accounts for the fact that consumers will be engaging with you across all channels. So you want every presence to kind of both supplement and complement each other, and then make sure that the data management system that you're using can keep all of that data organized together, because you definitely don't want to be looking at one channel individually and not keeping it in mind or in account with the other channels.
That makes complete sense. So, thinking about the end-to-end brand experience, and I know that you really, love taking the lens of the consumer. So, who do you think is doing this really well? And, what do you think needs to be done when really, thinking about that end-to-end experience?
Yeah. So we actually just published our Connected Retail report last month, and we audited a bunch of retailers across all their channels and across all their strategies to take a look at what the customer journey looks like. And one of our top retailers to watch in the next year is IKEA. And it's really because we do admire their multi-channel strategy and just how they've clearly mapped the customer journey and really understand what a consumer looks like and what their behaviors look like when they're shopping for all of the different goods that they offer. So, every channel has a purpose. It's very deliberate. It's very intentionally designed. I also just like as a brand that they are very trend forward, but not so hyper reactive that they're getting caught up in the wrong trends. For example, they've really put a stake in the ground around sustainability. They're very focused on that, which is definitely a trend, but not a fad. It's something that will only become increasingly important to consumers. We know that, younger generations are really prioritizing sustainability when making shopping decisions. So I would say IKEA, their app is very cool and allows you to do different things than if you're shopping in a physical store. Their website is really strategically designed, and their fulfillment offering is really up to par. They know that a lot of people will want to go to the physical store and either, save money and kind of fulfill the order themselves, or, they do definitely have that delivery opportunity as well. So
makes complete sense. I've had very good shopping experiences with IKEA. So, Melissa, before when we were chatting, you mentioned that you're, really passionate about the use of consumer insights. Could you, dive a little bit deeper into, why you're passionate about that?
Yeah, I think it's really obvious when a brand has kept their consumer research in mind when designing either the product or, the different engagements or touch points with the consumer, or if they haven't. And you can even see that from a marketing perspective. You can see it from, a product development perspective. You can even see it from a fulfillment perspective in terms of the different fulfillment offerings that they have as options. So I just think whether or not a brand leverages the consumer insights, it's very obvious in their user experience. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because that is what makes or breaks a customer's experience with you, is whether their usage of your product or, their shopping experience with you is really resonant and suits their priorities, their needs, their behaviors. So there are some brands that I interact with just at a personal level where I can clearly see that they know all the ways that consumers want to engage with their brand, and they are leveraging that information for good. And then there are some brands where you can just see that they are clearly not paying attention to how consumers are interacting with them or how consumers want to. And it's just so apparent in their user experience. And so I'm just passionate about it because I have some really positive experiences with brands at a personal level, and then I have some really negative ones. And for me, it just seems so obvious that you should be tapping into consumers today because they're a wealth of information and they want to give their opinions on things.
And so, consumer insights sometimes could be, these market research reports, which, are not necessarily affordable for every brand to do themselves. So what are, for the smaller brands, what are the easier ways to, get some of those consumer insights, to inform their product roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, the most inexpensive way is to just engage yourself, both with your competitors, do some of those competitive shopping engagements, and then also to shop your own brand. There are so many brands where I think to myself, if someone at the C level just tried to use this app for a minute, they would understand why consumers are not downloading it. And that's, a free way of conducting research. So that is, I think, the most important journey anyone can go on while they work for any sort of brand, whether it's product or retailer, is just to shop the brand that you work for. And also ask friends and family to do the same. You can kind of create your own affordable focus group sometimes in that way too.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Okay, so we are going to move into our lightning round now. So just some quick answers on some of your favorite things. Favorite omnichannel brand?
I really do love Rent the Runway. It just makes so much sense. I have a lot of events and occasions right now, and to be buying clothing that I'm only going to wear once doesn't make any sense. And I do love both their app and their website.
I do think that they do a fantastic job. Yeah, Jen and Jenny are really amazing. Thing that you wish you could change about our industry?
I wish there were more incentives to do the right thing. Like I mentioned sustainability before, and I think it's great to see some brands really caring about that. And I actually wrote a sustainability report last year talking about how digital can support sustainability for brands and retailers. But I think right now, too many companies are thinking about solely the bottom line and how if they increase costs and they increase the charges to consumers, they won't be rewarded when it comes to sustainability. But it's a long-term game. It's so important. And that's just one example of, I wish the incentives were more readily available for brands to be doing the right thing. And the same thing goes with social causes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely agree with that one. Favorite podcast?
So I listen to some really lighthearted podcast because I actually draw inspiration from, I think, some kind of unlikely places. So I really love the Comments by Celebs podcast. There's actually a lot of good inspiration it can provide if you're listening for it. But from an educational perspective, I love revisionist history as well.
Okay. Favorite newsletter?
My friend Lisa Amlani does a great newsletter called The Merchant Life. She has a lot of experience as a buyer, so she brings that perspective into her merchandising work and has a great newsletter.
Amazing. I'll have to check that one out. And then just for everyone's benefit, I know you mentioned you did merchandising at Target. Could you just explain what merchandising means in the retail world?
Yeah, that's another term that can kind of mean a lot of things. I did merchandise presentations, so I was actually the go-between between buyers and stores. So I was creating all of the planograms for like the bedding and domestics categories for Target Canada. So I would work with the buyers and create their vision for how they wanted consumers to be shopping the different aisles in that space. And then, write that up in planogram form and send that over to stores, and then stores would be the ones to execute. So that was merchandise presentation, but merchandising can really be it's anything under the umbrella of strategy for how then the consumer accesses the product. So that can be, pricing, that can be promotional strategy, is oftentimes the display strategy. So like what I did, the merchandise presentation, it's like product creation in the technology as well. So there's a big technological aspect too, but it's really just everything related to the product in a retail space.
Great. Favorite social media channel?
So social media for me is also very fun. So I like Strike Two Poses. It's a fashion account. And then I also love following a bunch of stylists. So I really like Maeve Riley. She's like one of the top stylists right now. And then Carla Welch also is a phenomenal stylist. And I like following them because it also gives me insight into what retailers need to be doing differently, because consumers now are getting inspired by these stylists and these influencers versus by retailers. And that was actually something that Dani Levy, who is Kim Kardashian's stylist, was saying. She was saying that she and her peers are the ones driving retail trends, not retailers today. So it kind of informs some of my thinking there, but it's also just great eye candy to be seeing how they're styling people.
Yeah, it goes back to the whole concept of omnichannel. It's like the social media channels where, customers are, inspired, whether that's TikTok or, Instagram via these, influencers. That's like an important channel for you to be, communicating with your customers as well. So I completely resonate with that. Favorite book?
Picture of Dorian Gray. It's kind of cliche, but it's phenomenal.
Love it. And then favorite event that you're planning on going to this year?
The Retail Innovation Conference and Expo in Chicago. This will be my third year there, and I'm super excited. It's always a great event and just very intimate setting. All of the breakout sessions are, it's usually 100 to 200 people in a room, and they do let you do kind of that live Q&A with C-level execs at retailers. So you can learn a lot really quickly there.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that conference. So makes sense.
Right.
Melissa, thank you so much. I really appreciated your time, and it was great chatting and hearing your story.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, and also I'm actually moderating a panel at South by Southwest in a couple weeks too, which I've never been. So I'm really excited for that too.
Oh, amazing. And before we wrap, actually, where can our listeners connect with you?
LinkedIn is definitely the best place. And I do try to post some thought starters on there at least once a week. I don't like to, spam the feed because there's lots of good information there, but I do always like to post some sort of new idea in retail that a retailer is demonstrating, and then kind of get some conversation going for sure.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Melissa. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank you. So good talking to you.
If you liked this podcast, follow me and the Bridge page on LinkedIn and Twitter for hot takes and tactical advice. If you really loved today's episode, we'd love a review on the podcasting platform of your choice, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for listening.